Jack the Ripper is one of the most infamous serial killers in history, terrorizing London's Whitechapel district in the autumn of 1888. His identity remains a mystery to this day, but what is known is his brutal method of killing. Jack the Ripper targeted prostitutes, brutally murdering and mutilating at least 5 women. He would slit their throats and disembowel them, leaving their bodies grotesquely posed. His gruesome murders were so shocking that they made international headlines, and the police received numerous letters claiming to be from the killer, including one signed Jack the Ripper. The lack of forensic science at the time, combined with the poverty and chaos of London's East End, made it impossible to catch the killer. Numerous suspects have been proposed, ranging from prominent figures to unknown drifters, but none have been definitively identified as Jack the Ripper. His case remains unsolved, and the mystery surrounding his identity has only added to his infamy, making Jack the Ripper a symbol of brutal violence and one of history's most chilling psycho killers. Ed Gein's gruesome crimes in the small town of Plainfield, Wisconsin, shocked the world and inspired some of the most iconic horror films, including Psycho and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Gein, living an isolated life on a rural farm, began his descent into madness after the death of his domineering mother in 1945. Deeply affected by her passing, he developed a twisted obsession with death and the female body, eventually leading him to grave robbing and murder. Gein confessed to killing 2 women in the late 1950s, but what truly horrified authorities was what they discovered inside his home. Police found human remains repurposed into macabre items, bowls made from skulls, lampshades from human skin, and even a full suit made from the skin of women, which Gein would wear. He had exhumed bodies from nearby cemeteries, focusing on middle-aged women who reminded him of his deceased mother. His disturbed behavior, including an apparent desire to become his mother by donning the skin suit, painted a picture of severe mental illness. Diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, Gein was declared legally insane and spent the rest of his life in a mental institution. While Gein was not a serial killer in the traditional sense, with only 2 confirmed murders, his legacy looms large due to the profoundly disturbing nature of his crimes. His ability to transform the human body into objects, and his bizarre attachment to his mother's memory provide a disturbing glimpse into the depths of human psychosis. The horrors discovered at his farm remain ingrained in American culture, symbolizing the darkest corners of the human mind and inspiring fear in generations of horror enthusiasts. John Wayne Gacy's double life as a beloved community figure and one of America's most prolific serial killers is as chilling as it is grotesque. Between 1972 and 1978, Gacy assaulted and murdered at least 33 young men and boys in the suburbs of Chicago, Illinois. His ability to lead an outwardly normal life, he was a successful businessman, Democratic Party precinct captain, and even performed as Pogo the Clown at children's parties, allowed him to hide his monstrous nature in plain sight. Gacy lured most of his victims by promising them construction work or money, appealing to their trust. Once they entered his home, they were handcuffed, tortured, and strangled. After killing them, Gacy buried many of his victims in the crawlspace beneath his house. His brutality was exacerbated by his calculating demeanor and the premeditated nature of his actions, often keeping trophies from his victims. The sheer scale of his crimes was revealed when police uncovered the bodies of 29 young men beneath his home and the surrounding property. His arrest in 1978 brought national attention to the horrifying case. During his trial, Gacy exhibited no remorse, attempting to shift blame by pleading insanity. However, the overwhelming evidence led to his conviction, and in 1980, Gacy was sentenced to death. His infamy only grew during his years on death row, as he bizarrely took up painting and even auctioned off his artwork. Gacy's execution in 1994 ended the life of a man whose outward charm masked a deadly compulsion to kill. His dual identity, as both the friendly local figure and the sadistic murderer, made him one of the most terrifying figures in American criminal history. Ted Bundy's killing spree, spanning from 1974 to 1978, left a legacy of horror across several U.S. states. Known for his charm and good looks, Bundy defied the typical image of a serial killer, which helped him evade capture for so long. His disarming appearance and polite demeanor allowed him to lure dozens of young women into his clutches. Pretending to be injured or in need of assistance, he used crutches or slings to feign helplessness, making women more likely to approach him. Once Bundy had gained their trust, he would abduct, assault, and murder his victims, often returning to the crime scenes later to commit acts of necrophilia. He was also known for keeping gruesome mementos, such as the heads of several victims. Bundy's crimes extended across 7 states, making it difficult for authorities to connect the dots. His ability to blend into society, maintaining jobs and relationships, made him even more terrifying, as he appeared to lead a completely normal life while harboring deadly secrets. Bundy's capture in 1978 did little to dim the public's fascination with him. His trial was one of the first to be nationally televised, and Bundy took full advantage of the attention, even acting as his own defense attorney. Despite his intelligence and attempts to charm the court, the evidence against him was overwhelming, and he was sentenced to death. Bundy was executed in 1989, but his legacy endures as one of the most chilling examples of how a killer can manipulate public perception and remain undetected for years. The Zodiac Killer is one of the most infamous unsolved cases in American criminal history. His reign of terror began in 1968 with the murders of 2 teenagers in Northern California and continued through 1969. Over the course of his killing spree, he claimed at least 5 confirmed victims, though he boasted of killing 37 in letters sent to local newspapers. The Zodiac didn't just murder, he relished in the attention, sending cryptic letters to the media and police, filled with ciphers and taunts. These ciphers, which the Zodiac claimed would reveal his identity, have become some of the most famous in criminal history, with one remaining unsolved for decades until it was finally cracked in 2020. The Zodiac's calculated use of the media and his ability to evade capture for so long cemented his legend. Despite an exhaustive investigation and the identification of several suspects, including recent DNA analysis, his true identity remains a mystery. The Zodiac's combination of violent murder and psychological warfare against the public and law enforcement makes him a unique figure in the annals of criminal history, his legacy living on in the unresolved questions he left behind. Charles Manson's role as the orchestrator of the brutal Tate LaBianca murders in 1969 remains a defining moment in American criminal history. Manson didn't kill his victims directly. Instead, he convinced his followers, young, impressionable men and women, to carry out his orders. Manson envisioned an apocalyptic race war, which he called Helter Skelter, and believed the murders would spark this chaos. He selected actress Sharon Tate's home, knowing its high-profile residence would generate widespread media attention. Manson's charismatic personality and twisted philosophy had drawn a group of disillusioned young people to his cause. Under his direction, they brutally murdered Tate, who was 8 months pregnant, and 4 others in her home, stabbing them multiple times. The following night, the cult struck again, killing Leno and Rosemary LaBianca. Manson intended for the murders to be blamed on Black Americans, thus igniting the race war he predicted. Though Manson didn't physically participate in the killings, he was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder and sentenced to life in prison. Manson's influence over his followers and the chilling nature of the murders he inspired continue to fascinate criminologists and the public alike. His manipulation of young minds and the ability to incite violence through ideology highlight the dangerous power charismatic leaders can hold over vulnerable individuals. Jeffrey Dahmer's horrific crimes, committed between 1978 and 1991, shocked the world with their gruesome details. Dahmer's killing spree resulted in the deaths of 17 men and boys, primarily young African-American men, whom he lured to his Milwaukee apartment. His methods of murder involved drugging his victims before strangling them. But what set Dahmer apart from other killers was the horrifying acts he performed after the murders. He dismembered his victims, keeping body parts as grotesque trophies, and even practiced cannibalism on some of them. Dahmer's obsession with control went beyond taking lives. He attempted to turn his victims into submissive zombies by injecting acid into their brains, a brutal experiment that failed each time. His chilling need to dominate every aspect of his victim's existence, both in life and death, painted a portrait of a deeply disturbed individual. The true extent of his crimes was uncovered when one of his victims managed to escape in 1991, leading the police to Dahmer's apartment, which was filled with human remains, photographs, and instruments of torture. Despite the horrific nature of his crimes, Dahmer was not sentenced to death. Instead, he received life imprisonment in 1992. However, his time behind bars was short-lived. In 1994, Dahmer was killed by a fellow inmate, ending one of the darkest chapters in modern criminal history. The extreme nature of his crimes, combined with elements of necrophilia and cannibalism, ensured that Dahmer would be remembered as one of the most grotesque serial killers of the 20th century. Between 1984 and 1985, Richard Ramirez, known as the Night Stalker, went on a terrifying rampage across California, committing a series of brutal home invasions, sexual assaults, and murders. Ramirez's methods were particularly sadistic. He attacked victims of all ages, from young children to the elderly, and his brutality was compounded by the satanic symbols he left at crime scenes, such as pentagrams drawn in blood, sparking terror and media frenzy. Ramirez didn't follow a clear pattern, making his attacks unpredictable. He entered homes through unlocked doors or windows, often at night, and used a range of methods to kill his victims, including shooting, stabbing, and bludgeoning. The randomness of his crimes heightened the sense of fear across Southern California. Adding to his infamy, during his trial, Ramirez embraced his dark persona, flashing a pentagram tattoo to the cameras and showing no remorse for his crimes. The public fear reached a fever pitch until August 1985, when Ramirez was recognized by a group of civilians in East Los Angeles. They managed to capture him before the police arrived, bringing an end to his deadly spree. In 1989, Ramirez was convicted of 13 murders and sentenced to death. However, he died of natural causes while awaiting execution in 2013. His reign of terror, marked by sadism and satanic rituals, left a lasting scar on California, solidifying his place as one of America's most terrifying serial killers. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into history's most infamous serial killers, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment with your thoughts or suggestions for future topics.